Michael was honest to say, I was wrong. This is how he admitted it in one of many interviews.
Oh, no question. And that, of course one takes one's own share of blame for that. I think that there was a tendency to assume a greater level one of political comprehension that can distinguish between a democratic socialist and social democracy and a communist, that they're totally different things. I think that I overestimated the level of political awareness and consciousness, and therefore, often if one, in hindsight, had maybe phrased things differently, it would not have fed into the whole reverberating confusion of the time. I wish I had it to do all over because I think I'd do some things better.
How would you have done it better?
Well, I tell you, if I knew what I now know about the limits to the capacity of the state to just take on things, you see, I think that if I had maybe come out of a different background, not a trade unionist background, but a long background in politics or business or something, I'd have understood better how business people think and how the middle class think. Would have had a more realistic sense of the limits to the social goodwill of certain groups, that have never faced those issues. That one might have approached in a quieter, more patient kind of way.
Michael Manley. Two other points before I go to the break. In November last year, November 29, 2019, one of our finest sons, who was at one time an advisor to Michael Manley, he's now professor of sociology at Harvard University. He said at Mona, at the launch of one of his latest books, Orlando Patterson said, quote, "Our failures were largely self-inflicted. We tried to move too far, too fast. Our problem was not primarily a lack of funds. Our problem was an inability to follow through with the numerous projects we instituted." He's speaking of the PNP administration of the 70s. Some of them half-baked, nearly all lacking in capable leadership. The paradox and tragedy of radical change, at least in the Caribbean, is that you can't run a revolution without people to manage it. But a revolution is exactly what is guaranteed to send the managers fleeing, especially when it was a virtual mark of status among the Jamaican bourgeoisie to have a home and bank account in not-so-distant America. However, says Patterson, Professor Orlando Patterson, then in the 70s an advisor to Michael Manley. However, the movement's biggest problem may well have been Manley himself, the charismatic leader par excellence. It was a sight to behold him, holding a crowd in spellbound rapture and adulation. And yet, he could be quite distant in personal interactions unless he was making an effort to charm you to his point of view. He loved the people. He was rarely at ease with ordinary people. He was at heart an intellectual. My most animated discussions with him were about ideas rather than the details of the policies I was involved with. His public life was one of utmost propriety, honesty, and integrity, and unlike nearly every third world leader of his day and now, he left office with less money than he entered. In fact, nearly broke. But his private life was one of ruthless selfishness and sexual corruption. With the exception of 2 of his 5 wives, the beautiful one who died young in his arms, Barbara that was, the other older one in whose arms he died, that was Glenn, he broke the heart of nearly every one of the many wives and lovers who succumbed to his irresistible charms. And that, alas, was equally true of his daughters. Professor of Sociology at Harvard, former advisor to the late Michael Manley. Orlando Patterson. I make one final comment this morning. To the leadership and activists of the People's National Party who have sought to profess outrage over Holness's comments. Once again, you are at risk of allowing yourself to be outflanked, independence-born Prime Minister and leader of the Labour Party. If I may dare say, your response would have been rejected by Michael Manley. He would have taken on Holness and challenged him intellectually on the issues that are confronting Jamaica in this global space today. He would have engaged Holness as to how, not missing out on the fourth industrial revolution, making the best of our opportunities, how will he ensure that the mission, the permanent mission of economic independence and social justice are achieved? Michael would be engaging him this morning, challenging him to a public debate. That would have been Michael Manley's response. But sadly, his party today is devoid of the intellectual acuity to so respond. You all need to go read and learn from Michael Norman Manley. Time for the break.